Every morning the scent of bacon was my shield against a violent past, until 3 men walked into my diner and reminded me who I truly was. The smell of frying bacon and fresh coffee is my sanctuary. It's the scent of a life I chose, a life I fought for in ways no one here could ever imagine. For 10 years, I've been Sarah, the owner of the Morning Glory Diner. I know my regulars by name. I know who likes their eggs runny and who wants their toast burnt just so. I find peace in the rhythmic clatter of plates, the gentle murmur of conversations, and the predictable sunrise that paints my front windows gold every morning. This life is my reward, a quiet harbor after a lifetime in a storm. I buried the woman I used to be, and I buried her deep. That's why when the bell over the door didn't jingle but clanged violently, every nerve in my body went taut. The peaceful morning chatter died down to a nervous whisper. 3 men stood there, silhouetted against the bright morning light. They didn't look like they were here for pancakes. The man in the middle, a greasy specimen with a snake tattoo crawling up his neck, swaggered in like he owned the place. His 2 bookends were walking slabs of muscle, their eyes sweeping the room with a predator's cold assessment. I kept my hands steady as I wiped down the counter, my smile practiced and non-threatening. "Morning, gentlemen. Table or booth?" The leader, Snake Neck, slid onto a stool at the counter, his cheap cologne warring with the smell of my bacon. He ignored my question and ran a dirty finger across the clean formica. "Nice little place you got here," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Real cozy. Must be tough for a woman like you, running it all by herself." My training kicked in before I could stop it. An involuntary system check. Leader, overconfident, relies on intimidation. Thug on the left, fidgety, keeps his right hand near the inside of his jacket likely armed. Thug on the right, calm, a brawler. Notice the scar tissue around his knuckles. 3 hostiles, potential weapons within my reach. 1 scalding coffee pot, 1 cast iron skillet, 1 bread knife, 3 heavy-duty water glasses. Exit points, front door, back kitchen door. I forced the thoughts down, shoving them back into the box where they belonged. I am Sarah. I am just a diner owner. I manage just fine, I said, my voice sweet as the syrup in the dispensers. Now, what can I get for you boys? The special today is biscuits and gravy. Snake Neck chuckled, a nasty grating sound. We're not here for the food, sweetheart. We're here to talk business. See, this neighborhood is getting a little rough. Businesses need protection, the kind we provide. My heart didn't speed up. My palms didn't sweat. Instead, a cold, familiar calm settled over me. It was the feeling I used to get right before a mission, the deep-seated quiet that precedes utter violence. But I couldn't let it show. I had to play the part. I don't understand, I stammered, making my eyes go wide. I've never had any trouble here. That's 'cause we haven't been around, he sneered, leaning closer. I could smell the stale cigarettes on his breath. But things are changing. We're offering you a chance to get on the right side of that change. A small weekly fee, and we make sure nobody bothers you. No broken windows, no fires, no unhappy customers. He gestured vaguely at the few patrons still in their booths, his threat hanging thick and oily in the air. That's when old Mr. Henderson, who's been eating oatmeal at the same table every morning for 8 years, decided to be a hero. He slowly got to his feet, his hand trembling on his cane. "Now you listen here," he said, his voice thin but determined. "You leave Sarah alone. This is a respectable place." Snake Neck turned his head slowly, a look of amused disbelief on his face. "What did you say, old man?" I said. "Leave her be, Mr. Henderson repeated, taking a shaky step forward. I wanted to scream at him to sit down, to stay out of it. He had no idea what he was stepping into. Before I could say a word, the brawler on the right moved. It was fast and brutal. He didn't even hit him, just shoved him hard in the chest. Mr. Henderson crumpled like a paper bag, his frail body hitting the worn linoleum with a sickening thud. His glasses skittered across the floor. A collective gasp went through the diner. Time seemed to slow down. I saw the fear on my customers' faces. I saw the triumphant, ugly grin on Snake Neck's face as he turned back to me. See? Unhappy customers. It's a real problem. He winked. Now, about that fee. He trailed off, his smirk faltering. He was looking at my face, and for the first time a flicker of uncertainty entered his eyes. He didn't know what he was seeing, but I did. The friendly, slightly scared mask of Sarah, the diner owner, had just cracked. The warmth had evaporated from my expression, replaced by a stillness so absolute it was like the dead of winter. The man I was looking at wasn't a threat. He was a target, and the part of me I had promised to keep buried forever began to claw its way out of the grave. He had just made the last mistake of his life. My smile didn't just fade. It was never there. The friendly diner owner was a costume, and they had just ripped it off me. My hand, still holding the damp rag, didn't tremble. I placed it deliberately on the counter, the soft thump of the cloth, the only sound in the suddenly silent room. Snakeneck's grin faltered completely. He saw the shift. The prey was gone. Now, I said, and my voice was different. The syrupy sweetness was gone, replaced by something flat and cold, like polished steel. You're going to pick that gentleman up. You're going to apologize to him. And then you are going to walk out of my diner and never ever come back. He blinked, confusion warring with his bravado. He tried to puff out his chest. Or what, sweetheart? You gonna hit me with a spatula? The one on the right, the brawler who'd shoved Mr. Henderson, took a step towards me. She needs to be taught a lesson, boss. That was his mistake. He telegraphed his entire movement with that single step. As he lunged for the counter, I moved. It wasn't a panicked reaction. It was a calibrated sequence of events. My right hand shot out and gripped the handle of the full, scalding hot coffee pot. In one fluid motion, I spun, swinging the glass carafe like a mace. It connected with the side of the brawler's head with a sickening crunch of glass and bone. Hot coffee and blood exploded across the floor. He went down without a sound, his lights completely out. Before anyone could process what happened, I was already moving on to the next target. The fidgety one on the left finally made his move, his hand diving inside his jacket. But I was closer. I vaulted the counter, landing as light as a cat between him and the door. He was still fumbling with the zipper of his jacket when my left palm struck the base of his nose, driving cartilage up into his sinuses. His eyes rolled back in his head and he collapsed backward, his head hitting the door with a loud bang that made the little bell finally jingle. 2 down. The whole exchange took less than 3 seconds. The diner was dead silent, save for the low gurgle from the brawler on the floor and the hiss of coffee evaporating on the hot griddle. I turned my head slowly to face the last one. Snakeneck was frozen on his stool, his jaw hanging open, his face a mask of utter disbelief and dawning terror. The hand he had resting on my counter was now trembling. He looked from his 2 unconscious men to me, and for the first time in what was probably a very long life of bullying and intimidation, he understood what real fear felt like. "The spatula?" I asked, my voice a quiet whisper that cut through the silence. I took a step towards him. He flinched so hard he almost fell off the stool. "Who? What are you?" he stammered, his eyes wide with panic. I leaned in close, my face inches from his. I could smell his terror. It was sour, like curdled milk. "I'm the woman whose quiet morning you just ruined." I grabbed the front of his grimy shirt, my knuckles digging into his collarbone, and hoisted him effortlessly off the stool. He dangled there, his feet kicking uselessly in the air. "You didn't answer my question. Who sent you?" My other customers were plastered against the back wall, staring with wide, horrified eyes. They weren't looking at a hero. They were looking at a predator. They were looking at something they didn't understand, and it terrified them more than the thugs had. I could feel their fear like a physical weight. My perfect, quiet world was shattering around me. I don't know," he squeaked, his voice cracking. "Wrong answer," I said, and slammed his head down onto the Formica counter. The impact echoed through the diner. I pulled his head back up by his hair. A crimson spiderweb was spreading from where his forehead had hit. "Let's try again." Tears and blood streamed down his face. "Volkov," he gasped. "His name is Volkov. He runs this territory now. He sent us." The name hit me like a physical blow. The air rushed out of my lungs. Volkov. It couldn't be. Not him. I checked his file myself. I read the coroner's report. I saw the satellite photos of the funeral. Anatoly Volkov, the butcher of Minsk, was dead. He was my final mission, the monster I was sent to put in the ground before I was allowed to disappear and become Sarah. I had put 2 rounds in his chest myself from 1,000 yards away on a snowy night in Belarus a decade ago. My grip on his shirt loosened. He crumpled to the floor, sobbing. My mind was reeling, a maelstrom of confusion and a deep, gut-wrenching dread. It had to be a different Volkov. A coincidence. It had to be. My eyes scanned the pathetic man on the floor, and then I saw it. As his jacket sleeve pulled back from the fall, a tattoo on the inside of his wrist was exposed. It wasn't a snake. It was a small, intricately detailed, 2-headed raven. Volkov's personal sigil. The mark of his inner circle. A mark I hadn't seen in 10 years, since the night I watched his last guard fall. It wasn't a coincidence. The ghost I thought I had made was hunting me. The sight of that 2-headed raven tattoo was like a key, turning in a lock I had long since cemented shut. Memories, skills, and a persona I thought was buried forever came flooding back to the surface. The woman known as Nix was awake. Sarah, the diner owner, was just a ghost now. The past wasn't just catching up to me. It had kicked down the door and was pointing a gun at my head. Without a word, I turned from the whimpering thug and walked to the front door. I flipped the open sign to closed and locked it. My regulars, huddled by the kitchen pass-through, watched me with a mixture of terror and awe. Mrs. Gable, who always ordered a single blueberry muffin, clutched her purse to her chest. Old Mr. Henderson was being helped into a chair by another patron, his eyes wide behind his crooked glasses. I looked at them, my face unreadable. Everyone stay calm. The police are not coming. This is a private matter. Stay away from the windows, and you will be safe. My voice was no longer the one that asked them how their grandkids were doing. It was the voice of command, cold and absolute, and they obeyed without question. I dragged Snake Neck by his collar into the kitchen, his men still unconscious messes out front. I threw him against the stainless steel prep table. You have a phone? You're going to call your boss, I said, my voice low and dangerous. You're going to tell him you found me. Tell him exactly where I am. You're going to tell him I'm alone. He stared at me, his eyes full of confusion and terror. Why? He'll kill you. He'll kill us all. That's the point, I said, pulling my own burner phone from a hidden pocket in my apron. A relic of my past I could never bring myself to throw away. But he'll only kill you if you fail. I dialed a number I hadn't thought about in 10 years, a number that connected to a satellite system that no longer officially existed. The voice that answered was gravelly and familiar. It's been a while, Nix. He's alive, handler, I said, my voice tight. Volkov is alive. There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end. That's impossible. We confirmed the kill. The confirmation was wrong. He's here. He sent a welcome wagon to my diner. I glanced at the terrified thug. I'm sending him an invitation back. I'm ending this. For good. We can extract you, Nix. You don't have to do this alone. There is no we anymore, I said, a decade of bitterness in my voice. You left me in the cold. I made a life here. He found it. That makes it my problem to solve. I'm erasing the liability. Just do one thing for me. When this is over, make sure the diner is protected. Make sure Sarah gets to keep her peace. I ended the call before he could argue. For the next hour, I turned my cozy little diner into a kill box. I arranged tables and booths to create choke points. I unscrewed the gas line to the main grill, rigging a simple but effective incendiary trap. I sharpened my best butcher knives until their edges were like razors. I was no longer Sarah, wiping down counters. I was Nix, a weapon forged in the darkest corners of the world, and I was in my element. When the black SUVs pulled up outside, their engines cutting the afternoon silence, I was ready. I stood behind the counter, a pot of coffee brewing, the aroma a stark contrast to the violence about to unfold. Volkov didn't send a team. He came himself, flanked by 6 men in tactical gear, all carrying automatic weapons. He thought he was the hunter, coming to claim his prize. He kicked the door open, the shattered glass tinkling musically. He was older, a thick scar running through his left eyebrow, my scar, but it was unmistakably him. He saw me standing there, calm and serene. "Nix," he rumbled, a triumphant smile on his lips. "I knew I'd find you. It took me 10 years to piece together how you survived, how you vanished. A diner owner, how quaint." "You should have stayed dead, Anatoly," I said, my hand resting near the switch for the gas grill. "This life was good." "I will enjoy tearing it apart," he sneered, and gestured for his men to advance. The fight wasn't a fight, it was a harvest. They were soldiers, but I was something else entirely. I was a phantom. I used their numbers against them, the tight confines of the diner becoming my greatest ally. A thrown skillet disarmed the first man, a knife in the throat silenced the second. I triggered the gas trap, and a fireball engulfed 2 more, their screams cut short. The air filled with the stench of cordite and burning grease. It came down to me and Volkov, circling each other in the wreckage of my sanctuary. He was bigger, stronger, but he was clumsy with rage. I was fluid, precise, every movement with purpose. He lunged and I moved with him, turning his momentum against him, my hand striking a nerve cluster in his neck. His arm went limp. I broke his wrist, then his elbow. He roared in pain and frustration. Finally, I had him on his knees, his own weapon pressed under his chin. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with disbelief and hatred. "How?" he choked out. "You came into my home," I whispered, the rage I'd held back for a decade finally surfacing. "You scared my customers. You pushed Mr. Henderson." I ended it, not with a bullet, but with a final, precise strike that severed his spine. It was silent, efficient, and final. When it was over, I stood in the smoking ruins of the Morning Glory diner, surrounded by silence. My quiet life was gone, my sanctuary destroyed. But as I looked at the carnage, I didn't feel loss. I felt a strange sense of peace. The ghost of Anatoly Volkov was finally laid to rest, and with him, the ghost of Nix. I walked to the back, where my customers were still huddled. They looked at me, their fear replaced with something else. Respect. Mr. Henderson was on his feet, holding his cane. He simply nodded at me, a silent thank you. I knew I couldn't stay. The diner could be rebuilt, but Sarah was gone for good. But as I walked out the back door and disappeared into the alley, I knew one thing for sure. Volkov had been wrong. He hadn't torn my life apart. He had just reminded me who I really was. And somewhere out there, a new life, a new sanctuary, was waiting for me to build it. This time, I'd make sure no one could ever knock it down.